Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Michael Wendroff, author of What Goes Around. Welcome, Michael.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
I am super happy to have you. Loved the book. But before we really get into it, I would like you to give our listeners just kind of a quick elevator pitch as to what they're going to find when they open up the cover.
Okay. Well, the impetus for my novel was something that my mother said to me the second I was born, or so I'm told. I was put on her chest. She looked deeply into my eyes and she said, "Oh, how nice to see you again." And it was the again part that always intrigued me. And I always wanted to do something with it. It took me many years before I actually wrote this book. But in terms of what it's about mysterious killings that are going on in a small town. Two detectives who hate each other based on what happened in police academy together are assigned to the case. One is a male, big, brawny guy, think a Jack Reacher type. And the other is a brainy and beautiful woman. And they are on their journey to try and figure out what's going on and try and get the killer before they kill each other. They investigate some secret groups such as supremacists and incels and boogaloo boys and all of these terrible people. And there's many twists and turns along the way. And then there's that, final twist that goes back to really what my mother had said to me. And the critics have enjoyed that. They've called it a very original, revelatory twist. And I bet you and your readers would not figure that one out.
No, and I absolutely did not expect that. In fact, I thought the book was kind of ending.
Right.
I was at a very nice conclusion ending and thought we were done. And then there was like one more twist, which I always love in a book when you get the oh, good, it's all nice and whoa, what just happened here? So that was really good.
Yeah, it was fun because it had that maybe a little more traditional thriller ending after a twist, but then I wanted to just twist one more time.
One more twist just to make all your readers go, whoa. So I want to know what made you decide to write a thriller versus anything else, especially given that it comes from something your mother said to you at birth. You would think that some story that started there would be something, I don't know, family, quiet, women's fiction, some romancy, something, right? And instead you go to the thriller genre with that. I'm just curious, why thriller?
Really because those are the type of books I like to read, thriller, suspense, mystery. And in fact, my stepfather was a literary agent and he had some, very big clients back in the day, Robert Ludlum, who did the Bourne stuff that Matt Damon did the movies out of. And a lot of other, David Morrell, who did Rambo, a lot of really good thriller writers. So since I was getting these books for free, that's what I was reading. And since they were really good writers, best-selling books, I kind of learned, from an early age from reading those, what I like in thrillers, what I think works. So since I love them and learned a bit about them, that's why I went into the genre.
Well, that makes sense. Absolutely. I mean, they tell us to write what we know. And if you know thrillers, then that's what you should do. Now, so I had to go and look up if this was book number one, because you allude to like this history between Jack Ludlum and Jill Jared. Those are the two detectives in the case. And you kind of allude to this, history. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there's a first book. Because it wasn't like I needed it, but I was just curious. So then my question is immediately, are you going to write a prequel or do you have any sequels planned with these two characters?
Good thinking, because there was some history that I kind of referred to, and that history was mostly in my mind. But I'm actually, writing another one right now. I was working on it this morning. And it is a prequel. Interesting that you mentioned that. And so it does have the two main characters because, I have a marketing background and publishers also feel that it's good for even authors to kind of establish themselves as a brand. So write in the same genre. So I'm not only sticking in the same genre, but I'm decided to use the same characters from what goes around in the prequel to get a little more into them.
Right. Well, like I said, I had that feeling that it could exist, because I did think, I wonder if this is a second, because I've done that before where I've read seconds and they're fine. I don't have any problem with it. But you get these little, tidbits thrown in and you think, oh, there was a story before this that's going to go back. And so I checked and it was like, there is no story before. We kind of started in the middle of their story. I wonder if he'll go back. And so the answer is yes. How cool is that? Yeah.
And it is my debut thriller. So I've been lucky with how it's gone.
Absolutely. You touch on some pretty deep themes. We've got racism, we've got domestic terrorism, white supremacy, those kinds of things that we're finding in today's news. Very, very relevant, very scary. Why did you choose to go that way? Thrillers, they can run a gamut. They can have a wide range of things. Why this?
Well, really, because, a couple of things. I wanted my book to feel current. And a lot of critics wrote about the fact that it's dealing with some tough issues that are currently plaguing us in many places.
Right.
And the other reason is really when the whole Charlottesville march happened, the Unite the Right thing a few years ago, and that woman got killed. I was just really affected by that. And not only just, feeling terrible about it, but trying to understand how in the world can people be like this? How does this happen? So then from there I said, well, let me research this and let me try and understand, what their thinking that led them to their behavior was. So, so tons of reading, tons of research. Yeah. And that's how, I got into what they might say, however misguided. And so forth. So that's basically why I did that, to be both current and to try and get some understanding of what the hell is going on. Yeah.
So when you started this book, had the Charlottesville already happened?
Yes.
And so you had already done some research, and then you just naturally took those two and put them together.
Yes.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you tried to show, in the mind of someone who is that misguided, who has those kinds of opinions. And you did it in a way that, at least from when you're standing in their shoes, they almost seem, I can't explain it because it's not correct. It's not correct. I don't mean that, but from their point of view, they are correct.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And that, that was the kind of problem I had in writing it, is how do you
make something so
make people understand?
Be okay.
Without going too far, not crossing the line.
But I think that you did a really good job of us at least trying to get into the psyche of how someone could feel that way, or especially, your one character now, and the name is going to escape me, but the young
Saint.
man. Yes. Saint, thank you. My mind just went blank. But when Saint, he's this kid who just kind of feels like he's an outsider all the way around.
Right.
And how does someone like that get sucked into something like this? And I think you did a really good job of kind of explaining that it wasn't like it happened all at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't one day wake up and say, I'm going to be a white supremacist. I mean, it didn't do that. And I think that's what maybe is something that people can get from this, is that this is something that happens over time. Right. It's like little drips and drops until finally it just seems somehow right. Right.
Yeah. All of those scenes were very hard to write. Those were the hardest in the book to write.
Right. Right. So where did you get your information when you were doing this kind of research? How do you get into the psyche of a crazy?
Well, I do a lot of research before I start writing. And, back when I was writing this, ChatGPT really did not exist.
Right.
So it was a lot of Googling. With my second book, you have to be careful with ChatGPT, but it's more efficient in terms of research. So you still have to check your sources and be careful. But it is much more efficient. But back then it was a lot of Googling. But, the thing that I find is best for research is to talk to actually the people who do those type of jobs that you're writing about.
Right.
So I was lucky. I was able to talk to FBI agents. I was able to talk to a chief of police in my town. I was able to talk to a female detective, which was very important for my story. She gave me a lot of insights and anecdotes that made it into the book. So I was able to talk to all of these people and get a real feel for the inside part of it and what's going on. And I think that's important, to talk to people who are in your book. Now, I don't think I spoke to any serial killers.
Not that he's aware of.
Who knows?
But did you talk to anyone who was a white supremacist or in one of these crazy groups?
I did not. I just did a lot of research, and I spoke.
Right.
Well, I spoke to someone who actually wrote a book on them, and he had gone in and been among them.
Okay.
So talking to him directly was
gave you some insight without having to, because I can imagine that would be to me, it would be a very terrifying, very difficult thing to try to remain neutral in the face of something that I found as abhorrent as I would find that. So
right, that would be one step too far for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So I can imagine that. So, so I was reading in your biography, I think on Amazon, and your mom was an editor. You said your dad was an agent. You worked in a literary agency while going to college. And then you went into marketing. At what point did Michael say, I want to be an author? Like, I don't want to be on the outskirts of all of this. I want to actually write.
Yeah. Well, I always, was able to, like in school and in business, to write well. It came easily for me in that type of writing. And, maybe it's partially in the genes, because my mother actually was an editor back in the day for New York City publishing houses. In fact, I distinctly remember her when I was young. She'd be home on the weekends, sitting cross-legged on the couch with manuscript pages strewn about her, red pen in hand, marking up those manuscript pages. So, I would think that the benefit of seeing that was preparing me for when I got my editorial input, because it wasn't in a red pen, but the marking, the notations, it feels
that way, doesn't it?
The manuscript felt that way. Exactly.
Yes, it
was just as tough as my mother's red pen. Yeah. So I had a little of it in the genes from there, and in school, when I was going for my MBA, actually at NYU, I wrote my MBA thesis on publishing in the marketing industry, because I was always interested in that whole industry, and so I was marketing in the publishing industry.
Right.
And for that, I had to interview a lot of people in the publishing industry, editors, and all sorts of folks. And I distinctly remember one time waiting outside the editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, a guy by the name of Michael Kort at the time. And it's beyond the time for our interview. And I'm waiting, and finally the door opens up and he waves me over. He says, "Oh, sorry for being late. I want to introduce you to someone." And standing there is Truman Capote in the hat, the white suit, just as you'd imagine. And talk about thriller writers in cold blood. It doesn't get much better than that. And then, I wrote that thesis dealing with publishing, and it was actually excerpted in what's the publishing industry's trade journal. It's called Publishers Weekly. And they excerpted it in 3 different editions, and they actually paid me for that. So that was the first time I got paid for writing, and I like that.
I bet you did, yeah.
So, I've always been, in and around it a little bit. But what finally got me to write the book I always wanted to write was COVID, because at that point, there's nothing else you can do. I mean, I couldn't even go to the beach, play tennis, do anything. So I was out of excuses. I finally had to write the book I always wanted to write.
I do want you to know that you are not the only person that I have interviewed that said that COVID was kind of the impetus. It's not that they said, oh, well, I've never wanted to write, but I think I'll start that today. But it was like, I now have time. I've always said when I have time, when I have time, when I have time, and now I have time. And so I would say that there are a lot of authors who kind of began in 2020 because all the other excuses were gone.
Exactly.
So they finally got around to it. I am curious about your writing style. Like, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you a combination? If you're a plotter, what do you use? You know, those kinds of things.
Right. So I am a plotter. I admire pantsers who just sit down in front of the PC and start writing the story and don't know where it's going to go. And I know, between plotters and pantsers, bestsellers come out of both. But I'm awed that a pantser can do that. But that's not me. I mean, I have to plot things out in a lot of detail. So I need to know, where the story's going, what the big twist ending is going to be, what are the twists along the way, where do I plant the red herrings, what are the arcs? I need to know all that ahead of time, and then I can start writing. But it's not like the story doesn't change. It could definitely evolve. I mean, sometimes the characters will talk to me, and I'll have to do something different. Am I crazy? Maybe a little.
No, I have characters talk to me too, so we'll just be crazy in the same place, okay?
And yeah, great. And then there's times where, I remember the plot called for me to kill off a character, and I really grew to like this character. We bonded, and so I didn't kill him off. I had to change the plot. Right. But then there was another time, same kind of thing happened. I really liked this character. The plot called for me to kill him off. So I did kill him off. And like the whole next week, I was in depression. My wife's yelling at me, "What's wrong with you? He's not real." But there's the characters are real.
Yeah, I know. It is a crazy thing. I've talked to people that I visualize my characters. Like there was a time that I was trying to write a scene. I didn't want to write it. I didn't like what was going to happen next. I knew it had to happen, but I didn't want it to happen. So I was trying to come up with 1,000 other ways that I could resolve this thing, right? And my characters are all leaned up against the wall, waiting for me to write what has to be written. I feel like that. And when I finally wrote it, it was like they all pushed off the wall and said, there, now that you're done with that, we'll get on with the story. But it was, so I understand that feeling. It's like they do live in your head. And I tell people all the time, I don't need to be medicated, I don't think.
Yeah. So I'm a plotter, then I do my research, and then I do my writing. And my writing follows a strict pattern pretty much where, I'll start early in the morning and I'll just get the words out, get the story flowing. Certainly don't worry about spelling or grammar or anything like that. But don't worry about how anything sounds. Just move the story along. And then after that, I will, let's say it's day 2. So on the morning of day 2, I will review what I had written before. I'll try and make it nice, make sure every word fits correctly with the others in the sentence, and every sentence fits correctly with the other sentences in the paragraph, and add the analogies and the metaphors and all that stuff. And then when I've done that, then I'll start to scribble out the story for the next time, and the next morning go review that.
Okay.
So that's my process every day until I could finally write my favorite 2 words. The
end. Yeah. Which of course you and I both know is not really the end.
Oh God, no.
Right? I mean, that's just like the first the end. And then there's all the other the ends we have to go through to get to the end.
I could not, I knew you self-edit, but then I could not believe, if you're traditionally published like I am, that how many rounds of editing there are. I learned a lot, and I should have known more since my mother was an editor, but I was young then.
Well, and not only that, but you just assume, well, each of those manuscripts is a new manuscript. You don't understand that she's working on that same manuscript 4 different times, right?
Exactly right. But not only that, but there's so many different editing stages. So, the first is the editor that bought my book. And that editor I would describe as more of a strategic or a structural editor. Might say, you need a prologue, or you need to move this to the middle or back this way, which is fine. So you redo your book then based on that. And then you have a line editor who's, looking at every single line in there, making sure it's the best line. So you go through that. And then there's the copy editor whose job it is to make sure that you didn't say she has blue eyes in chapter 2 and brown eyes in chapter 3. If you have facts about guns or whatever, make sure they're right. And then there's the proofreader as well. And, through all of these stages, I have to read my book. I thought I was finally done. And then my publisher says to me, "Oh, Michael, the hardcover typeface has just been done. You need to go through your entire book again to make sure nothing fell out." I could not believe how many times I had to read my book. It's a good thing I liked it.
Right. But towards the end, you're kind of like, let's just put it out. I don't even care anymore. Let's get it out. Let's get it out.
True. Right? And as a writer, you can always change something. I can read a page now and say, I should have done this. But
and I do that all the time. You just have to come to a point where you put a hard stop on it and you just stop. It's like, I did the best I could, move on. Next book, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm always surprised at the proof editor, because at that point, it's been through so much editing that you would have thought that all of those silly mistakes would have been found. And so I turn that in and I expect to get back very little. And then it's like, oh my goodness. How amazing. Did we miss all of that? Yeah.
You're so right. But what's even worse is, thankfully I haven't seen this in what goes around, but normally every time I pick up someone else's book, even from big 5 publishers, there's mistakes in it. So it's going through all those rounds and there's still mistakes.
Incredible. And that's happened on all of my books. And then, you fix it for the next time it's printed, but
I guess when there's
there's what, 90,000 words?
Yeah. There you go. There's a lot of words in a book.
Right. And what happens, at least for me, like if I'm doing at the point that I'm doing self-editing and I'm looking, I know what it's supposed to say. And I know what I meant. I think that I must read it the way I meant it, as opposed to the way I actually put it down, Sure. And then they'll show it to me and it's like, how did I miss that? Like, I know the difference between those words.
Right.
And yet here it is, right? So it's really crazy.
It's amazing.
One of the things I wanted to talk briefly about with you is your book has high tension pretty much throughout. Every now and then there's a small lull, but generally speaking, it's high tension. Yes. How do you do that? How do you manage to keep the tension that high without causing your reader to burn out?
Good question. And, I do like books that make you turn the pages. Right. I was very happy when J.D. Barker, who's a #1 New York Times bestselling author, was, first of all, willing to read my book and then read it and gave me the quote that said, "Relentless and gritty, Wendroff expertly weaves a narrative that begs just one more page." So I do try and do that. And I do try and do that, really 3 ways. One is I believe in short chapters. Right. I've read a lot of James Patterson, especially his earlier stuff. And, he was the master of that. And I agree with that. And I believe in really trying to end just about most of the chapters on a hook that will make the reader want to go to the next page.
Which makes it very difficult, by the way, if you're reading it at night and you're trying to go to sleep and you think, I'll just go to the end of the chapter, but then you can't because the next, and so you do that really well and it makes it miserable to read at night. So just a warning, guys.
And then I do also try and, to to make it worse, I do try and start the next chapter with very intriguing first sentence. I believe in, strong last sentences of a chapter, and then strong first sentences of the next chapter.
Right.
So, in terms of giving the readers a breather, yes, I do that at times where I'm trying to establish more of what the character is like and try and bond the reader with the character, because I believe, I believe that's so important, because if the reader isn't into your character, they're not going to care. It's not as involving. And
right.
So, I like, well, thrillers in general have less of that. I like to have more character bonding. And I think, those are the quieter moments where I try and establish what the character is and try and make the reader either like or dislike that character, but feel some emotional resonance there.
Right. But I've noticed that even when you're doing that, it's within a chapter that has a lot of tension. So it's like you've got this high tension at the beginning of the chapter. We can breathe for a moment because we're getting a little bit of character development, and then we're at the end of the chapter and we have a hook again. So you do a very good job with it. It was a book that I had to put down a couple of times because I personally needed a breath.
I've heard that.
Where it's like I need to know what happens next, but I can't quite yet know what happens next. I just, and so I'd put it down, but that wouldn't last long. I would go maybe like unload the dishwasher, and then I'd think, I got to find out what happens next. So that was really good. You did a really good job with that.
Thank you.
So you did tell us that you are working on the prelude. Once you've got that done, do you see this becoming a series where Jack and Jill are people that we see for some time, or do you have other ideas in your mind?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, the prequel I'm doing, involves Jack and Jill, and it does also, it involves a serial kidnapper. No, not a serial killer, but a serial kidnapper. There are these children disappearing all around the city. And of course, everyone's going crazy. But I'll always write a thriller for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure yet if they'll always be in my books or not. We'll see.
Yeah.
Depends on what they have to say to me too.
Right. No, I get it. I was just curious if you kind of had a plan in mind or not. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. Tell me something that you liked or learned in this podcast, and you will be in the running to win a digital copy of What Goes Around. So, Michael, if someone wanted to get in contact with you, talk with you about your writing style, the next book coming out, how do they do that? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is to go on my website, michaelwendroff.com, and there I have a form where you'll email me, and I love hearing from my readers, and I respond to all of my readers.
Fantastic. So guys, I'll have that in the show notes. So you can just head to the show notes and I'll also have some of his social media, et cetera, there, so that you'll be able to be able to reach out to Michael. Run out, grab the book, read the book. Make sure you review the book, because all authors love a good review. And Michael, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. So much fun. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.